everybody, my Buffalo buddies. This is Billy Sheehan, your bass player. And you're listening to me right here on Heard It on the X.
Hi, folks. Welcome back to Heard It on the X, the East Coast premier music talk show. And you're listening to little Jimmy Ehniger there with a friend of ours, Doug Yeomans. I don't even know if you recognize what that is. Welcome, Jim.
No, I wasn't listening.
That's you playing.
It's like Doug doesn't when I'm playing with him. That's a running joke.
I want to welcome you down, and it's truly an honor to have you here. The show started as a way to honor Buffalo musicians, and it's just truly an honor to have you on the show with us, and welcome down.
I'm uncomfortable with that, but
you are. You don't seem to be very comfortable with any type of accolades. I got to say that. You're not very comfortable with that.
You know, when it comes to Buffalo, I never really accomplished anything here.
Right.
And when I was inducted into the Hall of Fame, which was very much at the behest of other people, because I wasn't really cooperating, I said as much in my speech as, to me, and I did verbally dedicate it to the population of Western New York, because to me, I didn't do anything any different when I left here than I did while I was here.
Let me just read, for the listeners out there, though, let me just read a little bit of a resume. Jim has played on tours or albums with Coco Montoya, Maria Maldar, Bonnie Rait, Bob Dylan, Taj Mahal, George Harrison, Stephen Stills, Bob Weir, and his rendition of Rhapsody in Blue opened up the 1984 Olympics in Los Angeles. So to think that you don't need accolades or deserve accolades, I mean, plus piano player for Billy Vera's studio album, which spurned at this moment.
Yeah, a number one.
Number one. Yeah.
Actually, that was a live album. We did do a studio album follow-up eventually in Muscle Shoals with Jerry Wexler. I don't know if you know who that is.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And the Muscle Shoals guys, except for there was me and one of the sax players from the band.
Was Steve Cropper there?
No.
Steve Cropper is like my favorite guitar player.
No, he wasn't. We had, I'm drawing a blank on the name of the guy that played.
Yeah, that was just a little thing to throw in there.
No, I didn't.
So tell me about your time when you were in Buffalo. We've talked about this. Obviously, you and I are friends. We've had conversations. We've just recently become friends. But I get on the phone with you. I could talk to you for 2, 3, 4 hours. I mean, it's just it's amazing. But the one thing about Buffalo and Western New York is there's been multiple genres of music where there's been absolutely wonderful musicians, and everything from country to funk to jazz to heavy metal. I mean, Cannibal Corpse came from here. Rick James came from here. But there's that period of the soul and R&B stuff that I think is just really the Buffalo treasure stuff, and that's kind of the school you came out of, correct?
Very true. By the way, just a sideline, did you know that Neil Young and Rick James were once in a band together?
In Toronto, yeah. Yep. Unbelievable. And Rick was AWOL at the time. Rick was AWOL from the Navy.
That's why it was in Canada.
Rick was AWOL from the Navy and ended up in Canada.
I met Rick in, we're avoiding your question here, but at some point, I met Rick through the China Club thing in L.A., and a very interesting guy.
We were going to get into that. That's the first question.
What I said to him is, there's the Dave Chappelle skit. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
No. I've seen more than one. There's more than one.
Yeah, there's the Rick James skit, though, and that takes place at the China Club, where he's slapping Charlie Murphy.
Yeah, exactly.
I didn't know they did one specific. I liked him a lot. Frankly.
Rick, you did?
Yeah, yeah. Very difficult guy to get along with under the wrong circumstances.
It's funny in Rick's case, and I don't want to get off on a tangent again, but how many people don't realize he's from Buffalo? How many Buffalo people don't realize that Rick's from Buffalo?
Well, I probably just about everybody, unless they worked with him.
Yeah, there's a lot.
And the Rapella brothers worked with him, and
yeah.
He was, he was around here. Oddly enough, I don't think I was.
You were.
I left in like 74.
74. And now, when you left originally, you went to New York?
No, actually, unknown until this very moment. When I originally left, I went to New Orleans.
Oh, really?
That was my biggest influence. Dr. John, whose name is Mac Rabenek, who I later became friends with, because I went to New Orleans in 1973 or whatever it was, and there was no New Orleans musicians there. And I discovered they had all moved to L.A.
So you were following New Orleans musicians?
Well, not really, but I was disappointed. I didn't know what was going to happen when I got to L.A. I mean, that was a complete unknown. That was very scary. And I left here basically because I had no choice. But to not completely divert from your original point, because I think it's important. Yeah, that was a heyday, and one of the things that served me so well when I did end up in L.A. was being from Buffalo. Was you just named all of those styles and influences that were prevalent here.
Correct. Yeah.
And they're melded here in a way. The only other thing I can compare Western New York to is Southern Louisiana, which begat Cajun and Zydeco. All of these influences, everything from the Caribbean to France to whatever, and because it was thrown into this pot, and I believe that's true of Western New York. I've often referred to it as a Galapagos Islands of culture. Nothing came in and nothing went out for so long that it developed its own species.
It's true.
And it's the music style, no matter what you play, and it's you wouldn't know this living in New York. I mean, in Buffalo, there's no way to know this. But if it's like when you're cooking food and it's a stew or something, and it's going to sit in the stove or the oven for a couple hours. So you go away, and then you come back and you walk in your house and you go, hey, that smells pretty good.
Right.
If you just stayed there cooking, this is something I would like to talk to Chef Binks about, by the way. You don't notice it. And that's the way it is. When you're away from here, and then you're exposed to what goes on here, you know it right away, and it doesn't matter what style. You can tell. There's some kind of a fusion of styles.
So there's a distinct Buffalo sound.
There absolutely is. Absolutely. And it's recognized outside of Buffalo.
I thought you were just saying that we smell.
Like stew.
I am.
We just smell.
Who's Stu?
But now, when you were coming up through the ranks, we talked about this. When you were, and how old, you might have to be young when you left.
Well, no, I was actually fairly old for what I thought in the industry.
Late 20s? Are you in the late 20s?
I was in my, like 26.
Okay, well, mid 20s.
But this is what they kept telling you, because this whole explosion of pop music started with 17, 18-year-olds, the Beatles, Crosby, Stills, and Nash, all that. And to me, it's very interesting, the choice that was made, because the record industry kept making this choice, and culturally that, well, we got to find now, 2 years later, we got to find the next 18-year-old.
Next 18-year-old, right.
Well, then they would find a 21-year-old, and then it was, we got to find the next 21-year-old, instead, maybe that would be Jackson Brown,
right.
And then it was, well, now 25's too old, then there'd be Billy Joel. And I kept thinking I was too old. So, to me, I thought I was leaving kind of late.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But going back to the time that you were in Buffalo, though, and we've talked about this too, there was a time in Buffalo where you really had to have your stuff together to play. Or you work, I mean, the contemporaries that were playing in the clubs here were going to eat you alive. You'd too nervous to even go and sit in. That's the kind of...
Or have them listening to you while you were playing.
Correct,
Pressure beyond... pressure to the point of abuse.
Numbness, really. Almost paralyzation, really. I mean, and I was really young watching some of this stuff, and it's like, man, oh man, I would never play with these. I was scared to death. Just, I enjoyed listening to them, but man, I could never picture myself sitting in with them because they just frightened me to death.
Well, I started playing in bands when I was 16, 17. I was in a band with Billy McEwen when we were both in high school.
Who I love. And for some reason, this is a Billy McEwen story really quick. I wanted Billy on the very first show I ever did because I just worship Billy. I think he's great. And he's like, yeah, it'd be great. I'd love to do that. And I said, okay, it's going to be Sunday. And I gave him the date, May 2nd. It'll be Sunday. Oh, you know what? I never do anything on Sunday, but I got something going that Sunday. I said, no problem, Bill. I said, what do we do the next week, which will be the 9th? Yeah, that'd be great. You know what? I never do anything on Sunday. This went on for like 15 days.
By do anything, you mean have a gig?
Yeah, I never do anything on Sunday. So every time I mention a Sunday, so I think Billy just didn't want to come on the show. So, but I love Bill, sorry.
Well, if that were the case, I could only cite a real shyness and humility in Billy in person, which is very juxtaposed by the way he is confidence on stage.
Right, correct, exactly.
Yeah. But we actually famously, my mother accidentally spilled the beans to a club owner. Billy and I, if you get us together sometime, the stories between that and Posse, I mean, they get hilarious. But my mother was bragging on how good I was to the club owner, and at the young age of 17. You know what I'm saying?
So you got in trouble?
Well, yeah, the legal age was 18. You know, you couldn't be in the club.
Did they stop you from playing?
Oh, yeah.
Was that I
had 3 18th birthdays that year. I had one there, and I had one out at Bill Miller's Riviera, and then I had my real one.
The club that your mom spilled the beans to, was that was it at the Barrelhead, or was it at the?
Oh, way before this. This was a place. It was called. We were in a band called the Embers Blues Band, and it was a restaurant bar called the White Lodge.
Okay. And
it was on Genesee or something. It was like east of Transit, out there somewhere. I mean, and we didn't know what we were doing, you know. I mean, but we were listening because of the presence, the musical presence here of the people that were playing at that time. We were exposed to and listening to what turns out to be the best training you could ever have gotten in your life. I've said this many times. Being in Buffalo and growing up and being a musician with the kind of scrutiny that you're talking about and the kind of pressure on you was like going to graduate school.
Mm-hmm.
Or I used the analogy with you once, going to law school. And the pressure is unbelievable to be accurate, have it right. It's ridiculous, the kinds of we covered, you know, as a keyboard player. I had to note for note. I learned Aretha Franklin, Jerry Lee Lewis, Stevie Wonder. I mean, nobody does that. I didn't know
Les
that.
McCann stuff. I
mean,
the
Les McCann.
Yeah. I mean, there's
Ahmad Jamal. You know. And this is because this is what we were being exposed to by our mentors, I guess, you know, not directly but indirectly.
Right.
And it prepares you for anything, just like law school was, but it does not prepare you for the real world of law. So this is the best place ever to learn how to be recreative. But particularly then, at that time, it taught you nothing about being creative. You were learning all of these incredible playing parts as close as you could, and that was the standard. How close can you come to the guy that played it on the record?
Right.
But it didn't teach you anything about how do you come up with that when you got the blank slate in the studio. You know, like somehow these guys, you know, were born with these parts.
Right.
You know?
That's interesting. We're going to take a commercial break and come back on the other side and find out what this Buffalo training did for you once you got to the West Coast, because that's where there's just super interesting things that you've done in your life, and I want to touch on as many as we can.